Hello, this is Joe from Nerd in Korea. We are doing our deck check-in here, and this is Tazri, Beacon of Unity, Party Time, I'm calling this deck. So, here we go. Oh, good, my thing isn't working. This is all about reviewing decks. Usually, I review other people's decks. This is actually one of my decks, so we'll talk about that in a sec. Anyway, we're taking a look at Tazri, Beacon of Unity. This is a commander focused on using the party mechanic. So, the party mechanic, I feel like it's not really liked all that much, and I don't understand why. I think it is a pretty great mechanic, actually. It's an odd one, that's for sure. I think that's probably what puts people off. Again, with party, we're going to define that in a second here, but yeah, it's kind of an oddball kindred, basically. Alright. So, the TCG deck price on this is $57.96, so this is way more budget than my usual decks that I cover on this. I did build this as a budget deck, and I think it's actually quite good. So once again, this is an actual deck like I have it just in the other room, and yeah. I put it on moxfield, so you can order if you'd like to. Again, this is actually one of my decks, and yeah. This is a budget one, and it's intended to be budget. It was requested by Tequila Fishsticks, so thank you, Tequila Fishsticks. I actually hadn't thought of covering my own decks. I keep covering my friends' decks, and then it wasn't until Tequila Fishsticks was like, oh hey, could we see your Tazri deck, or could you cover your Tazri deck? I was like, oh, I could do my own decks. Oh, I actually hadn't thought of that somehow, so thank you for that, Tequila. So, thoughts on Tazri. Alright. This is a Wooburg commander, so first of all, it is Wooburg. That's very important to consider. It's always important to consider the color identity. When it's Wooburg, I think even more so. Wooburg is almost like not having a color identity because it's everything, right? That's when it becomes much more important to have like your game plan sorted out. Having mechanics really nailed down, having your ramp, having your mana fixing, all of that. It's much more important in a Wooburg than like a mono or a dual color deck. Anyway. So she makes use of the party mechanic, an underloved and undervalued mechanic. Making use of an unpopular mechanic is a great way to cut the cost of a deck. And that's exactly what I look for I've mentioned this in other videos, where one thing I look for when I'm wanting to do something budget, I'm like, what is not popular? What's a good mechanic that people don't like for some reason? And that is like always going to be a lot cheaper in general. So, okay. One, or I guess two more on this. While party is a relatively new mechanic that has not been featured on a lot of on a great deal of cards, it still has some gems. Some of the party mechanic cards are crazy. Like, especially when I get to the tutor. I think it's the best tutor in the game, honestly. If someone has a better one, I'd like to see it. Even it's definitely better than a lot of tutors that are like $50. Like, I don't know. Anyway. The party grants benefits for having 4 creatures of 4 types. So warrior, rogue, cleric, and wizard, alright? The classic D&D party. Basically, yeah. This, I think, was originally introduced with the first D&D set, Adventures in the Forgotten Realm, I think? And yeah, those 4, so if you have those 4, you get all kinds of like... First of all, there's a lot of things that like cut the cost, such as Tazri. This spell costs 1 less for each creature in your party. So you can, she's a commander, 4 or 6 you can potentially cast for 1 white. Okay, so as creature types go, those 4 are very strong and flexible ones, right? Alright, so they also cover bases of what a deck needs very well, with plenty of options for sneakiness. Alright, so again, warrior, rogue, they're going to do your combat damage. Warrior more direct and rogue more sneaky. And then you've got Cleric for your healing and recursion, and then you've got Wizard to kind of fill all your gaps, like filling card draw, scry, copying, casting, all kinds of things, right? Wizards are kind of like a toolbox. Anyway, yeah. So really, you got everything you need from those 4. So it's not much of a limitation. It's kind of an advantage, really. Alright, so key cards. So this deck focuses on getting a full party quickly and sneaky tactics to take the win. Filling the party. Okay, filling the party is really important, obviously, with the party mechanic. One of the main things you can look for is changelings, right? Changelings count as all creature types. You can still only count each one once, though. I've seen people asking online if I have a changeling, because it's all creature types, can I say this one changeling is the fighter, the rogue, the cleric, and the wizard? No. You need 4. You do need 4 creatures of each type. You could have 4 changelings, and that would count, but yeah. Anyway. Universal Automaton. Alright, so this is really only good because it's only 1 colors for a casting cost, and or 1 mana of any color, I should say, for a casting cost, and it's a changeling. Torian Mauler. This gets a +1/+1 every time your opponent casts a spell. Commander, you have 3 opponents, alright? So they're always going to be casting way more spells than you. Like, collectively, they're probably casting 3 times as many. Unless you've got a really strange deck, but probably you're going to be making this into just a really big guy pretty quickly. Masked Vandal. This is one of the cards I would put in like any deck. I'm going to make I'm working on lists for like upgrade cards, and this is definitely going to be on my upgrade list because it's so good. So when enters the battlefield, you may exile a creature card from your graveyard. If you do, exile target artifact or enchantment an opponent controls. For exiling one of your creatures from a graveyard, you get to like also exile, not destroy, exile enchantment or artifact. It's only 2 mana and it has like this huge removal. It's a 1/3 for 2 mana, which is, not bad. It's not great. But yeah, it's a changeling and it just like takes out a problem for you. Removal added to like a creature that already does something you want it to do is just incredible. Alright, so this is kind of the second flavor of like filling the party. They have several creatures that count as all of the types for a party. So Cleric, Rogue, Warrior, Wizard, this counts as all 4, and you get cost reduction on this for each one. Now I've got a fly attacking me, great. So it's 5 in the green. If you have a full party, it's 1 in the green for a Vigilance 5/5. Pretty good. The main thing you want this for, though, is like when you're almost finished putting your party together and you need that one last piece. Whatever that last piece is, he will be it. Also, any changeling, but yeah. He's a decent, attacker, blocker, and something you can get fairly easily, and even if you do have the full party, he'll benefit from it. With the cost reduction, if you don't have the full party, you complete it with him. So it's kind of a win-win. Finally, Stonework Pack Beast. Once again, it does have that counts as a Cleric, Rogue, Warrior, and Wizard thing, which is great for only 2 mana, 2 of any color of mana. Also, for 2 mana, you can add 1 mana of any color. In Wooburg, this is very important mana fixing. Obviously, paying 2 mana to get 1 mana is a bad deal, but it's an option that you do want to have. Party Synergy. Okay, Zagras, Thief of Heartbeats. So this spell costs 1 less to cast for each creature in your party. So just like your commander, this is 4 black-red, and if you have a full party, it's black-red. He is a flying death touch haste 4/4 that you can cast for 2 mana. That's crazy, and it's not done. Other creatures you control have death touch. Okay, so all of your creatures get death touch, and not done yet. Whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a planeswalker, destroy that planeswalker. We do have several unblockable creatures and creatures that you can, or ways to make creatures unblockable in this deck. So yeah, potentially this is just like shut down a Super Friend strategy, just turn it off. I always like to look for these in decks. Being able to put in one card that could just turn off a whole strategy is just amazing. So yeah, this is like a must-have in this deck. Concerted Defense. This is a 1 mana counterspell. Ooh. But of course it's a taxing counterspell. Some people don't like those. I think maybe, not to be rude, but I think you're using them wrong if you don't like them. The main thing is, like, you probably don't want to cast this against, like, the first spell someone casts on their turn. Usually the second spell, or if they're using a counterspell against you, you counter their counterspell with this. Especially if they have a counterspell, they usually have, like, the 2 mana open. This would require... Okay, so remember, okay. Counter target spell, or target non-creature spell, unless its controller pays 1 plus an additional 1 for each creature in your party. So that's 1, and up to 4 more. So they have to pay 5. To be able to, like, pay the tax, it'll be 5 with the full party. That's crazy. And it costs you 1 mana, and if they want their spell to work, it's going to cost them an extra 5. 5 is a lot. Even if it's that first spell, and they do pay the 5, they're not casting a second spell that turn, right? It's going to cost them a spell, basically, so, which is almost as good, I think. And if it's a counterspell or something, yeah, they're just not going to be able to do that. Multiclass Baldric. Baldric? Okay. I feel like this is such a weird word, but this is very important because we want to have... We've got 2 equipment in this deck, and we've got a tutor for equipment. So if we have the first one out, we want to have something to fall back on, and this is a great fallback. Equipped creature has lifelink if you control a cleric, death touch if you control a rogue, haste if you control a warrior, and flying if you control a wizard. So if you have a full party, this gives lifelink, death touch, haste, and flying. Also, if you control a full party, prevent all damage that will be dealt to this creature. Just ignore damage also. If you have a full party, you can put this on something and it just like ignores damage. Equip 2 only. Again, this only costs 1 to cast and it's 2 to equip. It is very dependent on having a full party, but like, oh wow. The benefits of having a full party are crazy. Nalia de Arnis. If you played the Baldur's Gate, Baldur's Gate 2, you probably have gotten her and done the whole keep subquest thing. I really love that one. I would play a whole like game that was just like managing the keep. I guess there are a lot of games like that, but just in the same like kind of the same Forgotten Realms setting and everything. Anyway, all right. You may look at the top card of your library at any time. This is an ability I think is just so undervalued. I think people do appreciate it, but like you can do so much with that information. It's crazy. You may cast Cleric, Rogue, Warrior, and Wizard spells from the top of your library. So any of those party members you need to get, you can just like do it. Change things, do it, right? Any card that counts as one of those, you can do it. At least I'm pretty sure you can. I would assume so. At the beginning of combat on your turn, if you have a full party, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. Those creatures gain death touch until end of turn. Another thing that grants death touch and puts +1/+1 counters on all of your creatures. This is something that has a lot of synergy in this deck. and we're going to get to that. We're going to kind of have automatic recursion on anything that has +1/+1 counters. Stick Together. I think this is one of the best board wipes in the game. It does cost 5, so it's a little more pricey mana-wise, but yeah. Each player chooses a party from among creatures they control, then sacrifice the rest. Sacrifice is so much better than destroy, right? So yeah, that's one where you sacrifice indestructible. It's one of those things that gets around indestructible, right? Indestructible creatures can still be sacrificed. So exile and sacrifice will get around indestructible. Now that I'm saying it out loud, I feel like I'm wrong, but I don't think I am. Anyway. Recovery. Solemn Doom Guide. So each creature card in your graveyard that's a cleric, rogue, warrior, and or wizard has Unearth 1. Unearth 1 just means you can put it back into the battlefield. It gains haste, and then at the end of that turn, it's out. Again, that's all about like getting whatever ability or ETB it has, and then like having the full party. Being able to pay 2 to like get something back for even turn to have a full party and get all kinds of benefits from that for the turn. So it's like a gap fill card, really. Escape to the Wilds. This card, I feel like I've seen this in action one time, and oh my gosh. Yeah. If there's when there's a board wipe, you hold this up and then you cast it. And then you just bounce back. A friend of mine used this in a game, and our boards just got wiped out. I think it was Mythos of Snap Decks. So we lost almost our entire boards, and he was almost fully back by the end of the next turn. Okay, let's exile the top 5 cards of your library. You may play the exiled cards until end of your next turn. You may play an additional land this turn. So it gives you 5 cards, and you can play an additional land that turn, right? So if you have a land in hand and a land from there, great. If you have 2 lands, just throw them both in, right? It's almost like ramp for board wipe ramp. It's such a weird card, but it works so well. I think a lot better than you might people realize. For 5. It sounds steep, it's not for what it gives you. Okay, Marchesa, the Black Rose, Marchesa? I think, yeah, okay. Anyway, Dethrone. Whenever this creature attacks the player with most life, or tied for most life, put a +1/+1 counter on it. Other creatures you control have Dethrone. So as long as you keep attacking the player with the most life, all of your creatures are going to keep getting those +1/+1 counters, which is very, very important. Whenever a creature you control with the +1/+1 counter on it dies, return that creature to the battlefield under your control at the beginning of the next end step. This is just huge. I had this happen in a game. She was out, and they kept like killing my board, and it's just like, okay, now it comes straight back. Okay, now it comes straight back. As long as you've got ways to keep putting those +1/+1 counters on things, you're just going to keep like putting everything back on the board every time. Like, they have to exile your board or like mass sacrifice or something just to be able to, like, even sacrifice, they'll come back. So yeah, exile. They have to exile everything, otherwise they just bounce back right away. Thwart the Grave. So this costs 1 less to cast for each creature in your party. Return target creature card and up to 1 target cleric, warrior, or rogue, or wizard creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. Once again, you do need to get the most out of it. You need the party, or at least a decent number. 6 casting cost, you'd never want to pay the 6. Even if you're paying like 4 and you're getting 2 creatures back, if they're the 2 creatures you need to complete your party, it's worth it. It definitely is. So yeah, even if you have a full party and you just want to get something back out for, or maybe 2 creatures back out for their abilities, this is great for that as well, right? So I do like things where it's like if you're behind, it helps, and in one way, and if you're ahead, it helps you push even farther ahead. And that's what this card does. Rogue's Gallery. This is very similar. For each color, return up to one creature card of that color from your graveyard to your hand. This doesn't go to the battlefield, unfortunately, but this can take... Again, we got 5 colors in the deck, so this can take 5 colors worth of creatures and put them back into your hand. If the creatures have more than one color, you can count whichever color you want, right? So I believe Nalia is Orzhov, she's white-black. So if you just want to count her as your white, and then you take a black, and then you take 3 more. 5 card recursion to your hand is crazy for only 3 mana. Oh boy. Tutors, okay. This is very important to consider in this deck. Threats Undetected. This is a great card. I think it's underrated, but I feel like I say everything is underrated, but it is. Alright, search your library for up to 4 creature cards with different powers and reveal them. Okay, so here's the major limitation. It is only 3 to cast a tutor that gets you 4 options. You don't get to keep them, but you do have to find things that have different power. Like they all have to have different power. An opponent chooses 2 of those cards, shuffle the chosen cards into your library and put the rest into your hand. Okay, so this is another good thing is that they go to your hand, not just to the top of the deck or some nonsense. They are going to your hand. Battlefield is always better, but hey, whatever. Anyway, so you're going to choose 4 things. One of them is going to be Machias, the Unhallowed. He counts as 0/0. He comes in with +1/+1 counters. So you got a 0, and the rest are pretty easy to make up with, like, depending on what you want. So yeah. A lot of your win cons are on creatures that have different powers. So even 3 win cons, the combat win cons in this are on creatures that have different powers. So you could find Mikias and those 3, and then hey, probably close out the game with that. Forging of the Tyrite Sword. So this is 3. The first 2 on the saga are create a treasure token. Mana fixing in this deck is so important, so it's a great thing to have. And number 3, search your library for a card named don't care. Or an equipment card, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. So any equipment, we have 2 equipment in this. Multiclass Baldric, which is very useful, but the main thing we want to get is our, now I can't remember what it's called. Basically, it lets you go in, every time you attack with the equipped creature, you go get a basic land, put it into the battlefield tapped. So you're going to like have your ramp and your mana fixing sorted with that. Oh boy. Coveted Prize. Oh my god. This card is insane. I'm pretty sure it's still under $1. I think, I mentioned this before, I think this is the best tutor in the game. Unless you got like Planner Bridge and you're able to like really reduce the cost in some way or pay it easily. I guess that might be better because it does go straight to the battlefield and it's reusable, but okay. Anywho, so 4 and a black, right? That doesn't sound good for a tutor, but this spell costs 1 less to cast for each creature in your party. So you can cast this for 1 black. A tutor for 1 black. Search your library for a card, put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. If you have a full party, you may cast the a spell with converted mana cost 4 or less from your hand without paying its mana cost. That's even better than I read the first time. Oh my gosh. Okay, so you're gonna tutor a card, any card you want, and put it straight into your hand. And if you have a full party, anything in your hand that's 4 mana or less, cast it for free automatically. So it could be the tutor card, it does not have to be the tutor card. just anything in your hand you feel like casting. If it's 4 mana or less, you do it for free. So this is a tutor that gets anything you want, and then it will, if you have a full party, you do need the full party, don't use this unless you have a full party, it will basically multiply your mana by 4 and cast a spell as well. 1 black for a free 4 mana spell and tutor. Oh my gosh, oh my gosh. Anyway, is that not the best tutor in the game? I think it is. I have a hard time thinking of one that could beat it. The plan. So how does this deck play? First of all, very important in Wooburg, mana fix, right? This is a very, very important step. Step 2, it's a party, right? Get your party down, and your party down, yeah. Anyway, finally, step 3, win con. Mana fixing, all right? So base camp, this is a great land, especially for this is made particularly for this mechanic, which is always nice to have. So it enters the battlefield tapped. You can tap to add a colorless. Add 1 mana of any color. Spend this only to cast a cleric, rogue, warrior, or wizard spell, or to activate an ability of a cleric, rogue, warrior, or wizard. So that's just like for all of your creature spells. Basically, that's your mana sorted on 1 land. Chromatic Lantern. Any multicolored deck, even 3-color decks, I always want to put Chromatic Lantern in. Its price has dropped significantly recently, so it's maybe not quite budget, but pretty close. Anyway, lands you control have tap, add 1 mana of any color, and you can tap it to add 1 mana of any color. So all of your lands just produce any color you want now. Amazing ability. Sword of the Animus. This is what I was trying to remember before, but my brain sucks, so I don't. Anyway, equipped creature gets +1/+1. Again, it is 2 mana for something that gives +1/+1 to a creature, which is lackluster, but whenever a equipped creature attacks, you may search your library for a basic land card, put it into the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. So this is just going to keep grabbing basic lands and throwing them into your battlefield. So if you need mana fixing, if you want ramp, whatever it is, you can just keep doing it over and over and over. Oh boy. Grand Warlord Rata. Whenever 1 or more creatures you control attack, add that much mana in any combination of red or green. Until end of turn, you don't lose this mana as steps and phases in. She does only make 2 colors of mana, but just for attacking, which is something you want to do. And again, we have a fair number of unblockable or ways to make things unblockable or give evasion. You're going to be able to take a lot of advantage of this, alright? This is something that's going to produce a whole whack load of mana. Finally, Grim Hireling. Whenever 1 or more creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, create 2 treasure tokens. So you're just going to keep making treasure tokens every time you get damage on someone. Again, unblockable creatures in this deck, it turns like your changeling. You've got a 1 mana changeling that is unblockable. He becomes essentially a treasure token generator. Whew. And then for 1 black, sacrifice X treasures, target creature gets -X/-X until end of turn. I need to put him in my Cheddarfang deck. It's basically a second Cheddarfang ability. Alright, it's a party. Changeling Outcast. This is one I was just talking about. So for 1 black, he's a 1/1, which is meh. What's great is Changeling and cannot be blocked, right? So all of those triggers that we get from being able to attack, you're going to do the damage and create mana and create treasure tokens and so much. Coveted Prize. So this spell, again, we talked about this already. Still think best tutor in the game. Is there a better tutor? I feel like there isn't. Svella Ice Shaper. She's another one that has a double usage here. So she can create mana rocks, which is insane. So for 3 and tap, create a color snow artifact token named Icy Manolith with tap to add 1 mana of any color. So she's a creature that makes mana rocks that can create any color of mana. Just, fix all of your mana problems. And for 6 and Gruel or red-green, look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may cast a spell from among them without paying its mana cost. 8 for that ability is a lot. You're looking at the top 4, choosing 1 and just casting it. And yeah. It's just cast a spell from among them without paying its mana cost. It doesn't specify creature or anything like that. So we do have cards in this deck that will be definitely worthwhile doing that with. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. Burricos, Party Leader. So this is another one that counts as all the creature types that you need for a party. And whenever he attacks, defending player loses X life and you create X treasure tokens, where X is the number of creatures in your party. Once again, he's just going to keep making treasure tokens. And he automatically drains. So if you have a full party, whenever he attacks, not does damage, attacks. The fly is attacking my face again, which is fun. The person you're attacking loses 4 life, and you make 4 treasure tokens. Yoy, yoy. Outlaw's Merriment. Oh, okay, little fly. So at the beginning of your upkeep, choose 1 at random. Create a red and white creature token with those characteristics. So you're going to make every upkeep, you're going to make 1 of the things you need. So a 3/1 warrior, warrior with haste, a 2/1 cleric with haste, or a 1/2 rogue with haste, and when this creature enters the battlefield, it deals 1 damage to any target. Just, you can ping whatever you want, just for free, and you get your requirements filled, so yeah. Defense. This deck board wipes can hit you hard, right? So you need something that allows you to defend. Linvala, Shield of the Sea Gate. Once again, she is a wizard, so that's great. And also you can sacrifice her and choose Hexproof or Indestructible. Creatures you control gain that ability until end of turn. Especially if you've got like Dethrone or Marchesa out and you got a +1/+1 on her. You sacrifice her, send her to the graveyard, she comes straight back. And you put another +1/+1 on her. That's what I was doing one game, and I was able to take the game with that trick. So yeah, great interaction there. Also, she is a 3/3 for 3 power. Threats undetected. I think you could use her as one of your threats undetected. Unsettled Mariner. Changeling again. And whenever a permanent you control becomes target of a spell or an ability an opponent controls, counter that spell or ability unless this controller pays 1. So anything they want to do, target removal, any ability against any of your creatures, always costs 1 extra. 1 extra is not a lot, right? What it is just a headache. A lot of people be like, I'd rather not pay the 1 extra, I'll just target someone else. There's 4 players, right? You're 1. Unless they really, really want to do it, usually even the 1 extra is enough to make them go, okay, fine, I'll target someone else. It's really just a disincentive. It's an annoying disincentive, but it works. Unbreakable Formation. So creatures you control gain Indestructible until end of turn. Once again, countering a board wipe with Indestructible, always great. And if you cast this during the main phase, you also put +1/+1 counters on all of your creatures. So you can use this to kind of amplify your damage and as defense. So yeah. They also gain vigilance until end of turn. So yeah, for one turn, make all of your creatures give them all +1/+1 counters, indestructible and vigilance. So you can just like attack with everything without any concern really. Frontline Medic. So as it enters the whenever a frontline medic and at least 2 other creatures you control attack, creatures you control gain indestructible until end of turn. So if you attack with him and at least 2 other things, everything is indestructible. And then you can sacrifice him to counter target spell with X mana cost unless his controller pays 3. So if they've got an X cost, you can make it cost 3 extra. You probably don't want to do that, you want the indestructible thing, but it's nice for an extra option. Semester's End. So this lets you exile all of your creatures until end of turn, and then they all come back, and they all get +1/+1 counters when they come back. The obvious downside there is that, like, as long as they're gone, you're open to attack. Hopefully you're not kind of the arch nemesis when this happens, but yeah. All of the kind of synergy you can get from the +1/+1 tokens and all the bonuses, like being able to like just bring them back to life, that's very good. Okay, win cons. I should have got water. Drinking coffee is not very hydrating. Anyway, okay. So here, these are 3 separate ones. You don't need all 3 of these. Only one will get the job done. And yeah. The first win con I usually look at is always combat. I think most games are decided through combat. It's nice to have other things, but like having options for combat win cons, I think is something that every deck should have. Okay, Champion of Lamholt. This is one of my go-to cards as well. Creatures with power less than Champion of Lamholt's power can't block creatures you control. And whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on Champion of Lamholt. So she's a warrior, which is good, but yeah. You get her out and just start piling those +1/+1 counters on her, either just by casting creatures or doing other things to get +1/+1 counters on her, and then all of your creatures are going to be unblockable by anything with less power than what she has. Usually by the time she gets like 4 or 5 power, they're largely unblockable. Okay, Archetype of Imagination. Creatures you control have flying. This gives everything flying. And yeah, creatures your opponents control lose flying and can't gain flying. All of your opponent's creatures just like can't have flying. All of a sudden, you're the only one with evasion. Basically, it's giving all your creatures unblockable, right? And finally, Midnight Pathlighter. Creatures you control can't be blocked except by legendary creatures. Obviously, commanders are legendary, so they're going to have something to block with, but probably not a lot. Whenever 1 or more creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, venture into the dungeon. We don't really care about that, but it's nice to have, I guess. Again, these are all different attack power, right? 1, 3, and 2. So these are the ones you can do Mikias, and these 3 with threats undetected, and then you're getting at least 1 of these are guaranteed to come to your hand. Alright, win con number 2. Approach of the Second Sun and Tazri, Beacon of Unity. So this requires 11 mana to set it up. Alright, so that's the first tricky bit. This is not an early, this is a mid to late game strategy, but yeah. You cast Approach of the Second Sun. On the first casting, you gain 7 life and it goes back into your deck, 7th from the top. Alright, it goes back to your library. Then you activate Tazri's ability, which lets you look at the top 6 cards. You take 2 creatures out and you put them to the bottom, the rest on the bottom. And then Approach of the Second Sun is going to be on top of your deck. Hopefully people don't remember that. because when you draw that and cast it again, and when you cast it a second time, you win the game. So you kind of do some sneakiness, especially Tazri's ability. Wait until someone else's turn to do that. Cast Approach the Second Sun, put it back there. Don't immediately go like now it's back on top of the deck. Wait until it's like a bit later. And don't let people just like mill you right away or something, you know? You want to make sure you're making it look like you're not immediately going to win the game. But yeah, the second turn right away you can immediately win the game. Alright, win con number 3, Door to Nothingness. Okay, so this is 5 mana and just the battlefield tapped. And for 2 blue, 2 white, 2 blue, 2 black, 2 red, 2 green, you can tap and sacrifice it to make another player lose the game. Alright, so this is great to use as like a finisher. Also, if one other player is like kind of the headache at the table, you can just take them out of the game. Player removal is the best removal, remember. Yeah. Suggestions. Alright, so we're going to look at some upgrade cards. Mostly I focus on what I consider to be budget cards. I think there's one here that I would not put at the $2 or less, but anyway, we'll see. Yeah. This was built by me a few years back. I thought it was recent, and then I realized that time is an unforgiving executioner of us all. I made this deck when Tazri was new. In my mind, I was like, oh, this is a new deck. And then I was like, oh, yeah, I made it when Tazri was new. And then I checked the Tazri. I'm like, oh, 2020. It's 4 years old already, the deck. Definitely the way I build decks has changed a lot. So even I updated quite a bit already. So yeah, I don't even know what I was thinking with some things. Definitely 4 years ago, I was like, oh, Mana Rock, sure, whatever. Oh, just 30 lands, sure. Like, 30 lands, you're crazy. Oh, past me, you were such an idiot. Anyway, okay. Replaceable card. So Alesha, who smiles at death. I really like this card in this deck. It is great for getting things back to your graveyard and being able to like recur things and make sure you're filling those gaps in your party. So yeah, it is good, but we could find better. Modify Memory. This is mostly a card I want because it is Commander. Basically, it lets you switch control of two target creatures controlled by different players. You can exchange control, so you can use this to like switch a creature you control with the creature someone else controls if you want their good creature, or you can use it to just like basically switch two people's commanders. Is what I was thinking. If you switch two, if they're controlled by different players, if you control neither creature, draw 3 cards. So you can take people's commanders and be like, okay, now switch, and then you draw 3 cards. Most commander decks are very based on the commander, so if you just switch commanders on them, you kind of turn off both decks, I think. So it's a great way to kind of deal with 2 problems at once. Turning off two of your opponent's decks is just hilarious. And finally, Universal Automaton. This is a very good card in the deck because it is a 1 mana changeling, but I think we can find better. So Alesha, who smiles at death. Harper Recruiter, I want to change this with. And whenever it attacks, look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may reveal a cleric, a rogue, a warrior, or a wizard card from among them. Put the card into your hand. Put the rest in the body in your library in a random order. Again, it's just that, like, basically scrying kind of card draw for one of the creatures you need to complete your party. It's about completing your party, and that's what you really do, using Alesha to do as well. So while she's going from the graveyard and the Harper's Recruiter is going from the top of your deck, they're kind of really doing the same thing in the deck, right? So it is the same overall function, going about it in very different ways. Modify Memory. Again, I do love this card because it can do so much, but Spoils of Adventure. So this costs 1 less to cast for each creature in your party. So it is 4 white-blue, but gain 3 life, draw 3 cards. So this does give you the card draw at instant speed as well. You gain 3 life instead of exchanging the creatures of 2 enemies. I don't know if I would actually do this. I'm leaning against it, but if you value the card draw over the messing with other people's decks, then this is probably better. I'm going to stick with Modify Memory personally. And then yeah, Universal Automaton. I really need to order a Mirror Entity. I gotta do this. This is basically adding a win con. Mirror Entity is I gotta add that to my list of things to add to decks as well. Pay X until end of turn. Creatures you control have base power and toughness, XX, and gain all creature types. So if you have 4 creatures, if you use this, automatically you have a full party, and they're all going to have base power XX, right? So you do need mana to be able to pour into that. I think with this deck, it's not going to be too hard to get at least a decent amount of mana. And if you're just looking for a finisher, that can do that pretty easily. Again, if you've got one of your win cons out, giving all your creatures flying and taking it from everyone else, just make your creatures like 10/10s, you win. That's it, right? Refocus Tactics. So this is something I looked at as well. Maze's End is actually above my budget limit, but yeah. Basically adding the gates to it. I was looking at doing this for a different deck actually, but I think this would fit in here very well. And I would probably take out a lot of the, I have the, what are they called? They come in tapped, but they can tap for 3 different colors. Those cards, not Triomes, the other ones, I don't remember. They don't have the land types. Anywho, yeah. I have those ones in there. I could easily take those out and put gates in, I think. Final thoughts. So this deck was made with budget in mind, taking advantage of people's attitudes towards mechanic. A mechanic can allow you to build a powerful deck on the cheap. That's something you should really look for. Something like Party, where it is a great mechanic, it has great cards, but people don't like it for some reason. I don't know why, but they don't. That makes it a very cheap deck, right? There's a lot of mechanics people just don't like. Not always clear why, but they don't. So if you can find those mechanics, build around those. Using Focus Tactics makes the deck much harder to counter. Once again, with something like Party, if you're relying on that, I know what my downsides are. The vulnerabilities to board wipes and things like that. You can then build around the weaknesses as well. Like having recursion, having those indestructible, ways to grant indestructible to all your creatures. I'm able to plan for the weakness in the deck and the strength in the deck by making sure I focus on the primary mechanic. I see a lot of decks that I think are kind of all over the place. You really want to choose one thing and make it all about that. You can have lots of sub-themes and lots of other synergies, but it's all got to kind of come back to that primary mechanic. Anywho, take it easy.